In 2016, USDA data indicates American growers used a herbicide on 97% of corn acres. A presentation at this year's Soybean Management Field Days aimed to help farmers make future applications safely and efficiently. Nebraska Extension's Proctor explained at this year's event how quickly incorrect amounts can impact costs and overall effectiveness. We spoke with him at the Field Day location in North Platte and began by asking why something as simple as using the correct measuring tool can be so important.
Yeah, so I guess I was talking about things that tend to be common sense when you take a minute and think about it, but they just get overlooked. But they can have a pretty big impact on the end product. So if you're over by 10% on what you're putting in your tank in terms of herbicide, that could cost you as much as $1,500 over the course of a section. And so it adds up pretty fast if you're not paying attention.
How do you make sure you're doing it right?
So a lot of it's just it's taking an extra minute or two to pay attention, make sure the container you're using is actually for measuring liquids. If you're measuring liquids, or if you're measuring dry, you want to make sure that the container you're using is a dry container. And then, with dry containers, I think it gets a lot more tricky because all of a sudden it's a measurement by density, and so you got to make sure the container is for the product you're using. So my recommendation has been with dry is just to go to using a scale.
Yeah, how valuable can a scale be?
A scale only costs you about $100, but if you think about a measuring container could be off by as much as 10 or 15% plus or minus, where a scale, that a gram is a gram or an ounce is an ounce, when you scale it out. And so I think that alleviates some of that problem.
How common are scales? Do you see a lot of guys using them, do you think?
You talk to guys, and I think it's becoming more common, but it's just that extra step. You're ready to go, you open the box, the container's right there, you pull it out and you start using it, or you just grab the one off the shelf. How busy it gets when it comes spraying season, and so it's a matter of convenience. So it's something I think if you plan ahead just a little bit, it'll help you out quite a bit in the long run.
Let's talk about tanks. So when you're using your sprayer, for example, how close can the measurements be, or how far off can those, 500, 1,000, can they be on that tank?
Well, you'd think you spend $500,000 in a sprayer, you could trust the marks on the side of the tank, but I would say it's better to know than to assume. So just because it says 1,000 gallons and you fill up to that 1,000 gallon, you could be off by 200 or 300 gallons. If you're parked on a side hill or just for whatever reason that mark was off, if you're off by that much, that has a big effect on how effective your herbicide is when you put it over the field. So I think taking the time to either go down to the co-op, put the tank on a scale and fill it up, and verify that mark is 1,000 gallons, or have some kind of flow meter where you can measure the water as you put it into something where you can verify your tank size. I think is pretty important.
Let's talk about flow meters. What can their effectiveness be?
Yeah, so now that a lot of guys have gone to using these bulk tanks for a lot of their liquid chemicals, flow meters have become a lot more important in terms of measuring. And I think the key with flow meters, one, you got to make sure it's calibrated, and you got to calibrate it to the liquid you're using. So water is going to flow a little bit different than, say, glyphosate, and so you got to calibrate it for what you're using. Something people don't often think about is when that battery gets down below about half, you just can't trust the calibration on your flow meter anymore, so you got to keep fresh batteries in it. And flow meters, they're not really very intelligent, so they don't know the difference between water or glyphosate or air. And so if you get down towards the bottom of that bulk tank and you start pulling air, you're still ticking off units, but half of it's air. And so just really pay attention as you draw down those bulk tanks that you're still pulling. You're not pulling air, but you're pulling product.